much playtime makes Stitches hungry.
We haven't seen any Stitches yet in this series, but we have had one so far. Is it time to play?
You know, maybe. It could be. China is the most comfortable outside of maybe Team Dignitas in the world to just be like, what about a Stitches here? You know, across the board. And understandably so. For instance, I believe it was 6 is one of the most impressive performances I've ever seen on a Stitches out of the region. You know, it just seems like the guy can't miss a hook.
You know who goes well with Stitches is Tyrande, too. We haven't had any Tyrande yet.
Not like this. That being said, I support Tyrande now more than I ever have in my entire life, but we don't. I wouldn't put that as a top-tier duo together. You know, but I mean, Western Clash, those two made wakes, you know?
They did. They did. We are at a point that I was not anticipating for this series.
I don't know how many people were, to be honest.
Oh.
Because, okay, so let's take a minute to appreciate. Okay, so one thing we have different with the Eastern, with not even just the Eastern class and the Western, just HGC in general, is we've never been able to gauge Tier 3 of a region to somebody else. One time ever have we been able to do that, and that was the Gold Club World Championship. We got to experience Seed 3 of China versus Seed 3 of Korea. That placed exactly how the Western Clash did, if you're more comfortable with the Western world, where it was EU, 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 NA, NA, NA. It was Korea, 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 China, China, China. So this is, if this happens, where a first seed of China is able to take out the second seed of Korea, that would make wakes in, you know, the power rankings of the Eastern world, and I think across the world, the power spike of the Chinese region, because I often, you know, talked about how it feels they have fallen apart since their eStar and EDG kind of as these roster shuffles, and they've been trying to find themselves. If they're able to do that against Korea here, who also is kind of trying to find themselves after, you know, MVP Black has made their roster shuffles, it would just be huge for the region, I think, across the board.
Yeah, eStar is a team that has been around competitive heroes as long as it's existed in China, but they got hit so hard when Xiaoti and Naicha left the team. Even before they left the team, they had been practicing with who the replacements were going to be, and then had to bring Xiaoti and Naicha back for the Summer Global Championship. We've never really seen them in their final form, and we heard rumors that this was finally the time for them.
It feels like every tournament, right? It's like here's the eStar moment, right? And it almost got to the point where it felt like the Korean teams were like just memeing us, right? Like it was just like, because a lot of them would go in, they would scrim them, and they'd be like, nah, eStar out of China, like that is who we're worried about. And it got to the point where it's like, are you just respecting the brand so much that you can't drop them in favor, or is this really a thing? So it does feel like maybe now that it's coming to fruition, you know, with eStar at least specifically.
Right, and for MVP Black on the other side, they too have gone through some roster swaps. It is interesting to see that at this time, eStar versus MVP Black, it is MVP Black who are the ones with the shorter duration of roster, and that does hurt a team when you start to go into just the idea that you have been losing together as a team, trying to make adjustments together with people that you haven't been playing with as long.
Yeah, it is, especially adaptation mid-game is debatably harder in that situation than anywhere else, because getting used to a guy with synergy and everything of the like is obviously going to be a very difficult thing to do and something we always see roster shuffles struggle with. But more than anything is that mid-tier in a game where things have been going well, then they're hurting. It's not only do they have the mental training endurance that, you know, maybe some of the lesser competitors may have, but I think beyond all else, it's do they have the skill set to identify what the problem is within their own play or within their team play, and the proper way of approaching that in comms, right? Like even that in itself is something I think that is kind of undervalued, is how do you go, by the way, you're approaching this whole team fight improperly, and you know, then is that accurate? And then if they trust you enough to make that adjustment, and then if they do you get the blame for the, like if it doesn't work out? There's a whole colossal set of, you know, what it means to be a great team that you have to answer when you have these roster shuffles.
Yeah, I think that's what made Team Dignitas so amazing at the Western Clash, is that they had these 4 members who had been on the team for so long, and to bring in somebody new, granted they did have the time of adjustment, but about the same time that MVP Black had, right, where they get used to each other and then really finally being able to find the trust in each other, and you could see when that happened. You could see in their play when that happened. Yeah,
very much so. And, you know, to show like the major difference, you know, because you could argue, well, maybe those 4 members are that powerful. But I mean, when Alex the Pro G came in, they didn't even make it out of the group stage of the tournament they competed in. So it very much was they were not only within Zalia and the power there, but just the 4 core members, and people like MVP Black now, Sake, you know, Mary Day there, having to make that choice, and even Kyocha, who has been on that role flex now, and it hasn't been working out. You know, his performance debatably one of the weakest on the team.
Yeah, and Reset, same thing that he had to go through a role swap for him. Great play yesterday, maybe a little bit of nerves, maybe just a tougher opponent. Regardless, it's still a best of 5. There is still time. And even if somehow eStar wins this series, MVP Black are not out of it yet. But this Battleground is a great way for MVP Black maybe to put a point on the board.
Yeah, it's going to be possibly the best map for them to turn the momentum here against eStar. But eStar was, in fact, the team that ended up picking the map. So comfort and confidence is what we see boasting here. And, you know, I think no surprise after we saw the emotions there from Jing Chen. But Tyrael is removed. Hovering here is going to be the Malfurion.
Jing Chen is very animated right now.
Yeah, I'm telling you, dude. I spent probably 3 hours in the same room, a ballroom with him, watching on a TV cast, and it was one of the most entertaining things for not being able to speak the same language out of anything. Just how enthusiastic and crazy, like excited, and a lot of it was like about the stitches, and then suddenly you could see him doing like the hook gesture of like, I don't know why they didn't get the hook. Like I couldn't understand it, but like I felt like I got what he was saying the whole time. It was crazy. Either way, though.
Hook is the same in every language when it comes to gestures.
Yeah. That is going to be the Tassadar lock in here for MVP Black, opening the opportunity to move in the direction of, you know, more of the Lucian, a bit safer, or excuse me, Lucio, not Lucian. Zarya Vala.
Yeah, Zarya Vala. So a response of having Zarya still a shielding hero. Are eStar terrified of Tracer at this point?
Yes. The answer to that is yes and yes. The problem is, do you risk putting Kyocha back onto that in this situation? That was his go-to in the past. He was, you know, it was absolutely powerhouse when it comes to that as a hero for him. I don't know, MVP has a lot of questions, or I have a lot of questions. It's just hopefully they provide a few answers for us here. I want to say I want a Malf, but then I also kind of don't. Malfurion has been such a high priority for MVP Black so consistently across the board that I almost want to see them mix it up. You know,
maybe it's time.
You give
maybe
the
it's
shake
time for
and bake,
the
you know, something.
The shake and bake. Is that Karzim's nickname?
Maybe, yeah. And Karzim's gonna be better here as well. You know, or just a first rotation Lunara, or top half of the draft Lunara. Things have, you know, gotten weird. Lunara is the hero of the Eastern world for competitive Heroes of the Storm. At least it looks like that is the case so far.
How funny is that too, to look back at when Lunara first started making waves in competitive scene, because it was it was summer, right? And it was Misfits, My Insanity at the time, playing a lot of her, and we were like, what is the Eastern world gonna think of Lunara? Had not been playing her at all at that point.
Yeah, and now it seems it's the exact opposite, right? The Western world has kind of neglected her, and they're like, no, she's got a spot, you know? She's making a lot happen. That being said...
Is it because of the Tychus decline?
I think it is. The lack of burst damage existing in the game period over the long period of time has just kind of been crippled, and in the single target auto attack damage especially is something that we don't really have, and Lunara provides a reasonable amount. You know, she's got a point and click, pretty solid burst onto a hero, that being her R, not even counting if you land the skill shot of her Q. And she's always been hard for supports to deal with, to be honest. You know, there are very few supports from the beginning, of her release that have been able to deal with her damage output, and even them have seen significant changes. You know, outside of the rise of Malfurion in this mid-tier section of supporting, you know, Uther was big then, couldn't do it. Rhaegar has been nerfed in the sense of his ability to be able to heal AoE. The only ones that have that option are, I would say, Malf. I don't know if I would be comfortable even saying Lucio does, at least not until 16. If you bank on 16 to survive, it's a bad strategy most of the time.
I'm wondering if Rhaegar will be the choice here, probably for SW, although is there any play for Ariel maybe? Oh, of course, Lucio.
It's going to be the Lucio and the Ragnaros here. Very well-rounded composition for eStar so far. A lot of survivability, decent frontline damage with the support choke we see coming into play. Merryday going back to that comfort there. He is going to be on the Karazim. Where do we see this last pick going into now? Is it, you know, agreement? They have the task. It probably I can't help but feel like the answer to that is going to be a no. What else would be able to aid them here into the race with Vala off? Tychus has fallen so significantly. Another frontliner in a solo.
Man, I don't know. It could be a Kyocha hero, but then again, Kyocha can play TAS if they want to play another backliner instead. But with Karzim TAS enabling, it seems like they would still want something you can be a little more aggressive.
Yeah, I'm afraid of another warrior pick, and that is going to be the choice. Artanis picked up here for MVP Black.
Final pick, the warrior for eStar.
I'm pretty sure you just Murden and win the video game.
Well, Murden is
no, that's a good
for
point.
MVP Black, so it could be.
That's a good point.
If we want more games of this series, which we do.
That was not what I was expecting.
What?
And there's a Chen. All right. So, what are we thinking here? We've got Artanis. We've got Chen. We've got Zarya Shield on top of the Chen. Originally, okay, so we've seen Chen already, and the answer was in a solo and the effectiveness of having a solo. BOE has a solo for about 30 seconds, and then you stop worrying about the solo lane. You know, it's more of just like a placeholder, like, hey, just go up in that lane and make sure we don't lose anything here. So I am very afraid of this Chen pick.
What if?
What if?
You're going for the Donkey Kong build, right?
Okay.
You've got all the slows. Then you have Lucio to amp it up, and you just dive.
I mean, yes, Chen is so great at diving. You know, I don't even know if you need to necessarily go Donkey Kong build to make that happen. It would enable your team a bit more. But, you know, with Lucio's movement speed that high, do you need the relative, you know, increasing the slow that much more? But
Maybe
does Chen have the damage output? You know, it can deal with Lunara. It can win the trade into a Lunara relatively successfully, but I don't know here. It does seem very out of place to see it. It's going to be hard to kill him, I think, just because Artanis, Tassadar, Lunara is really the only one who can. And, you know, it's going to be very comfortable for Lucian to dive in that backline. That being said, it does sacrifice a lot on the race.
How do you feel the race is going to go? Is it just so in favor of MVP Black?
Yeah, it's like not even close.
Because of Artanis or Nature's Culling at 7-2?
Iron Fist, Artanis amateur opponent, and then an option of going Lunara with Nature's Culling, even not having the Nature's Culling, just the poison itself. That being said, only Q build Vala is the only thing on the side of eStar when it comes to the race.
Yeah, and at least in A and EU, that did not necessarily do well for a team, that Q build Vala. It traditionally fairly low in win rates, but a lot of teams were running at the time. It did seem like it was starting to phase out though, so we'll see how it works for Xing Chen. Diving in very aggressively with the vault. First blood for MVP Black.
Yeah, but you know, I feel like I've seen this story. MVP Black gets first blood, they might get a second, they'll get a little bit of a lead, and 13 hits, and suddenly eStar has full control of the game, you know? So MVP Black needs to be able to hold that early lead. These advantages that are able to pick up over eStar, they're going to be able to change the tides of this series.
Templar's Will, we've seen this one other time for Tassadar, being able to amp up the damage of Tassadar's auto attack and later on give more range. And that was coupled with Resonation at level 7. That was this beautiful Lunara Illidan composition that we saw yesterday. Oh my gosh, that was my favorite draft of the entire day. So we'll see how he wants to build. If Sake adds Resonation at level 7 to be able to help Artanis, Karzim be able to chase down even Lunara people a little bit better.
One thing we do have to consider as well when it comes to just the Sulfura Smash, there is nothing to really set it up like we see in almost every other time we have a Ragnaros in the game. He will be able to obviously stop with this amazing defensive power some of the siege of the Immortal itself, but he's not going to have that prime. So if he can hit that, you know, kind of just raw stun is going to be huge here for the play. But eStar has managed to move up, get a little bit of damage there onto the Immortal before MVP Black.
Yeah, it was a favorable first spawn for those Immortals. MVP Black trying to do what they can to stop members of eStar from putting more damage here. Car's even going to rotate into.
Swap connects onto Lucian, but he's going to be just fine on his own for now. On the retreat, Reset has put a lot of poison damage out here onto eStar as their health bars are just dropping.
Yeah, this is difficult to keep up with. Later on, it'll probably get easier for Lucio, but right now it's fairly difficult.
Yeah, it is going to be rough for them as well. Tiger moves in, almost kicking in the halftime show, but not going to make it yet. Reset on full retreat now as the Molten Core gets the pick. And now eStar moves up and is going to set it halfway through here. Race significantly lost here by eStar. Or excuse me, MVP Black.
And eStar moving in. We'll see how much MVP can dedicate to trying to defend. It looks like it'll just be Tis trying to buy time for his team to lessen the shields as much as possible. Sake will even be another one to help out, but eStar will claim the first Immortal in this phase.
Yeah, and that all comes down to, we saw MVP Black, you know, they played the defensive, they moved up onto the Immortal itself, tried to get a fight, and the fact that they just weren't able to get it and losing Reset there was enough to let eStar finish the rest of this. This is not looking good for MVP Black, you know, if they wanted a shot in the series, because it's not even like we're looking at the later parts of what can happen when it comes to the draft of eStar, specifically coming out of the Chen, his survivability and just the annoyance that he really can be onto the team. But, you know, Lunar scales very well into the later half of the game, so maybe that's something, you know, I'm undervaluing here.
Yeah, she does. Late game, Lunar is terrifying for any team to deal with. But generally, Battlefield of Eternity, you don't go super late.
Yeah, you know, if you bank on level 20 in Battlefield of Eternity, it's probably the most unreliable strategy, or at least unreliable map when it comes to that strategy at all. Again, we've seen two swaps coming out from Kyocha. Both have been pretty much at point-blank range. I'd like to see, you know, a bit more God swap focus, if you will. You know, max range there, the bait there, Lucian diving on the reset with no fort to retreat to. Chen thrives, kind of like an Illidan. Oh, man. But that damage out on the Xing Shen.
Yeah, once again, there's a nice swap on a Xing Chen. That'll get a kill. This starts the kill train for MVP Black they're looking for. SW will be the next to fall. 2 kills off the back of that Immortal. eStar maintains the experience advantage though, but it does give MVP Black some time to get back into the laning presence.
Lucian will see this, but I don't think he has that much confidence to be able to move up in there. MVP Black able to hold off for now here in game number 3. Keep in mind, they are down 2 games in this series, and out of the 8 times we've seen these teams play, MVP Black always coming out on top.
Yeah, the one series was a 1-1 at Gold Club World Championship, so can't call that a win for eStar, but they've been getting so close, especially in this series. It would mean so much to them to get that win. One thing I want to talk about MVP Black while we have a second is Merryday is on another level with his Carzine plays. He's as of late. Heavy focus on him throughout HGC Korea. And it's neat to see how they utilize him. Things like versus a Tracer, trying to bait out and force out recall, and then he can dive in because he gets the triple dash at level 7 to enable him to get back out. Unless, of course, there's a Twilight Dream to stop him. That has happened before.
One thing to keep in mind is actually, I think he does well into Lucio specifically, just based on, again, that same concept, that Tracer with the mobility.
And especially with Lunara.
Yeah, but very, very vulnerable, right? So, you know, 100 Fists at 16 is going to be enough to make, you know, the SW there question his positioning and decision-making at a lot of points in this game. But the Immortals are up. The race is going in favor of MVP Black. No surprise there as Tist on the retreat. Bought a little bit of time there.
Yeah, and the positioning was a better start, but Reset is in trouble. Lucian wants to continue the dive, get separated from the team, secures the kill though.
Beautiful job there with the micro brew to be able to get that dive in. That was actually a pun I did not intend there with, but the micro use of his passive was enough to allow him to get enough brew to move in and get that dive, got the kill. 1-for-1 trade, and now setting eStar in another beautiful position when it comes to this. The question is, does MVP Black have the response here? Savage not going to get stunned out. SW with a good knockback, but that swap is going to lead Tiger and the rest of eStar to die.
And that shows the patience of MVP Black. They knew that eStar were going to get onto their Immortal, but MVP Black playing it safe, healing back up, then jumping back in the 4v4. Meanwhile, eStar, who were closer to the Immortal, so they were almost baited into wanting to attack it, were still fairly low, and that enabled MVP Black to get the kills that they needed, pushing eStar back in time. But eStar aren't going to hopefully do what we see some teams do at this point, which is send people in 1 by 1, just giving away kills. It's very important at this point that they don't do that because they still are caught up in experience with MVP Black.
Yeah, trickle in deaths is about worst case scenario, you know, for competitive, solo queue, everything about it. It just does not work out, you know, and it's so easy to fall for that trap mentality-wise, you know, very, you know, have to be self-controlled to be able to avoid those situations, but eStar here putting on a clinic is not going to be able to fall to that. This Immortal, though, moving with 25% shield, Molten Core already going to be used. 10 out of reach for now. This wave will not get it for him. So they're going to be out of that for now, but one more wave is all it's going to take.
Swing's already connected. MVP moves in.
They
Flip
go.
toss.
They're going to dive. There's going to be the blind drop very early on. Nobody looking to get that damage out. Reset, not taking that trade. Tiger just looking for his 10, but he doesn't have it. The swap onto SW, and it looks like Lucio is going to fall down as well. eStar, you saw them see that wave, and they were like, is that going to be enough? You know, I don't know. Maybe, possibly, but it just barely out of reach. Sticking around a bit too long, and MVP Black with the punish.
It's a tough spot for them too because they had Molten Core. They had the towers in front of the fort initially, so it felt like a rather safe position to siege up and try to defend. But not having heroic abilities and having heroes who can force positioning and dive, like Lunara with Leaping Strike and of course the threat of swaps, has gotten even more of a lead off of that Immortal than maybe eStar realized that MVP Black could get.
So we do have a small window now that Barrel has been locked in here for Chen. That there is no cleansing tool to be able to peel away from the Barrel if he gets onto a very solid target. And I think if it used properly, oh man, the Leaping Strike breaking down is going to be used. Barrel trying to split, so Pure Smash completely whiffs. Expulsion Zone used as well. Bunch of heroics traded. But eStar moves right on out, and that's going to be MVP's camp.
Now, Wandering Keg, Expulsion Zone, and Sulfurous Smash have potentially a lot of anti-synergy, knocking people right out of that smash.
Yeah, very much so, and that is really going to hurt here. No, you know, Molten Core maybe to possibly peel in this situation. Decent siege on the side of MVP Black, but more than anything, just how ugly that teamfight kind of went here for eStar. They do have a lot of pick potential, though, and I don't know the direct interaction between Keg into Lunara, because Keg actually can be a surprisingly, depending on how you're hit and where you're hit, oppressive spell. If you're knocked into specific things, it can, and you have nowhere to run, you can hit so frequently that even though you have an instant cast spell, like Leaping Strike to try and get out, you just have no opportunity to use it without that cleanse. So we'll see if Lucian can get that value, you know, to try and isolate the Lunara, but my first thought is that's a very optimistic idea, you know, to be able to move in and isolate such a easy ranged and then also mobile hero on her own.
Yeah, maybe it just makes sure that Lunara always keeps one of her charges up.
Yeah.
And then if she does get knocked in, she can hit it immediately and jump right back out. Later camp grab for eStar, but MVP Blacks is pushing onto keep structure, and MVP Black got the better setup for the Immortals too, so I would call the initial phase of this Immortal stage a win, especially if they can get a kill, but here it is, breaking it down, Sulfurous Smash.
Xing Shen is in a bad spot though, Leaping Strike, and he is going to fall here. One man down for eStar. Two is going to drop down MVP Black. Just, it has no fear. All heroics used on the side of eStar, but just palm, not even a question for Mary Day. No fear. The damage with the, you know, the anti-synergy you're referring to a bit earlier just seems like it's a bit too much here for, you know, eStar to lock down a kill. They just don't have the tools necessary, at least not yet here in this game. And now they're down an entire 2 levels, a 13 talent tier, and what's going to be 100-0 or more.
Yeah, it's hard for me to figure out what the game plan is moving forward with their comp.
I originally thought this was not going to be Barrel. I thought it was going to be Storm Earth Fire, and the idea is that you can just Lunara is going to look to kind of trade and dive into the backline, but then you can try and get onto her, apply so much pressure. If she turns onto you, it will hurt, but then you get to a position, you pop Storm Earth Fire, you take the trade for some period of time, and hopefully the rest of your team has done enough work to where you're going to be all right. But now that it's gone in the Barrel, it's just like, who are you going to isolate? Karzim, overly mobile. You know, Lunara is not necessarily the easiest. I mean, Murden and Artanis are probably the last two that you want, and Tassadar is just going to shift right on out.
Yeah, there are no options for that, and so far it's only amounted in, yes?
You could argue that Barrel could be a counter momentum for something, right? We've seen that in the past where it's like, here's the Wombo, and then you just kind of break it up, but like, where, you know, is there a Wombo?
No,
you know?
it's mainly whoever gets swapped, and then, okay, here we go. There's going to be the Keg. Kyochi getting pushed right away from the team, so sort of making sure that there's no swap, but that's a heroic.
It was, yeah, it created a nice buffer zone. Mary Day got a lot of pressure, so Furious Smash once again, you know, we talked about the raw stun, not going to land there, but he's under a lot of pressure this time. Strafe comes out. Jing Chen with the break it down, but there's going to be the leap. Reset moves in. He gets right on out, and he's going to maybe get 2 kills. Can SW heal it up? He moves into the base, he will, but Tiger gets stunned out by the Immortal. MVP Black with a 3-level lead, and now eyes on the core.
MVP Black taking a beat. Moving on to the core of eStar, and they will bring it back in the series.
Ever
1-2.
since the jam comment, everything you say, like with the beat,
I know,
it's
that's
all
why
Lucio.
I stopped, because I heard it. I was like, wait a second. But they didn't have Lucio. Dang it.
It's really bad, you know. Everything is a little bit works with Lucio, it seems like. But either way, MVP Black there. They get the win on BOE. That being said, eStar, you know, I can't help but feel like after that game, they got to be looking at their composition a little bit and being like, you know, maybe we didn't think that Chen threw that well.
Yeah.
Like, I understand that the Warriors were limited, you know, but
Right.
it just very much was like, what is Chen going to do? Even in a philosophical sense, like in a very, you know, ideal world where you min-max everything, like, I can't even find an absolutely ludicrous position where I can see Chen gaining value outside of this person is by themselves, and I have somebody else to confirm a kill, and I can barrel them in. But, I mean, any hero could do that if you're out that far, you know? You didn't need the Chen to be able to make that happen.
Yeah, let's Theorycraft, who might have worked out better for them. ETC and Tyrael were both banned. They
Yep.
kind of started with this chicken game of chicken, if you will, over the Warriors. Muradin got picked up for MVP Black. eStar left Warrior to the very end. They still had something like Arthas.
Yeah, Arthas was my first thought. You know, just he's very good defensively. I would
Opponents are so mobile, but you do have Lucio.
exactly. You know, it would be able to enable you a bit more. But I mean, to be honest, you look at that and you kind of go, Arthas really? But then you just think about, well, you chose Chen. You know, like that's what I'm saying. You know, the draft put you into that position to be like, what's going to be the most optimal here? I think most importantly, you just need a hard CC. Like, you don't even need it to be an Arthas. If there are any remaining where you can get that hard CC, it would be that much more effective. Either way here is going to be Kyocha there on the MVP, which conveniently enough is a part of MVP Black. It's rather confusing. We have 3 MVPs on one graphic here. But the Artanis there is our MVP of this game.
I don't know if you know this, but Kyocha is on MVP Black.
Is it? Yeah.
To make sure that you are aware.
Okay.
This is so good for MVP Black, though, really. That's a rough place to be in. Hopefully that doesn't bother eStar, that being said, too much. It was a drafting issue for them that put them in such a tough place throughout the game.
Yeah, it is really weird from a competitor mentality standpoint. I can very much see this being a breath of fresh air for MVP and their mentality, and I can also see it being a slightly crippling for eStar, but I can also see both very easily kind of distributing the responsibility elsewhere because of, you know, how radical the Chen pick was, but then beyond that, like, it hits a point where when you pop all your heroics and like your opponent's like not using even all of theirs and the fight's not close, like I can tell you from my perspective, often I'm just like, well, our comp just can't deal with this, you know? Like either we have to do something way different in a fight, like we just can't. And I would be very okay with like when I see that kind of trade, when it's even talent tiers, we pop everything we have and it's just not looking good. It's just like, we might have messed up, boys. Like, it's okay. Like, we'll just make for the next one. You know, they did their best. You could see them trying to be able to come back, but very comfortable. If I was eStar, just being like, all right, we messed up. You
right.
know?
We went to Savage's point of view, and he looked pretty down, but then it almost seemed like that's exactly what Xing Chen was saying. He was laughing it off for his team, so I'm sure they're not hit too hard, but we'll find out for the next game. We're taking a break. When we come back, we'll have game number 4.